Hi, Mohammed. Welcome.
Hi.
Oops, sorry. It's now 2 o'clock, so I think we'll make a start. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this Audit and Accounts Committee meeting this afternoon. The council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures or use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit, which is through the middle doors on my left, and assemble in the car park. Before I go to the first item, I would like to pay tribute on behalf of all of us to Councillor Matt Maguire, who sadly passed away recently. Not only was Mac the County Council's longest serving councillor, but the longest serving member on this committee, originally joining the committee in 2015 and consistently since 2017. He'll be greatly missed by members and officers across the council and by our partners across Cambridgeshire, and our thoughts are with his family at this sad time. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to Councillor David Ambrose Smith, who is a new member of this committee, and also just point out that Mohammed Hussein, who is our independent member, is joining us virtually for this meeting, as is Emma Duncan, who's also online. So moving on to the first item, apologies and declarations of interest. Rishinda, do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable, let me finish, Chris, pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Chris?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Graham. I do need to declare and put on record that I am a member of the Conduct Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. But what I have done is to ensure that any potential conflicts that may exist has been disclosed to the ICAEW. So when any matters concerning any existing or even past auditors such as BDO come up, I am excluded from those discussions. That means that I have no problem in participating at this meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other disclosable interests? No, thank you. The next item is minutes of the committee meeting held on the 1st of December 2023. Members were being asked to approve the minutes of the last meeting as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only, can they do so now, please? I can see no objections, so we will take that as carried unanimously. On that basis, I will approve the minutes as written and move on to the action log. We also have a copy of the updated action log. Do members have any questions or comments? No? Okay, we're therefore asked to note the action log, which we have done. Item 3 is on petitions and public questions. We've received no petitions or public questions, so we can move on to item 4, which is financial reporting and related matters. And can I ask Tom Kelly, Service Director of Finance and Procurement, to introduce this report, supported by Ellie Todd as needed. And then we'll subsequently deal, Mark and Jacob, with your paper later. Tom, do you want to just take us through each of the relevant years in turn, and we'll pick up any questions and comments as we go? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if we start with the objections to 2017 and the 2018 financial years, we're very pleased to say in an update to what's reported in the papers that on the 29th of January, the objections were determined by BDO as the auditor for those years, and statements of reasons provided to the objector. The conclusion of that work is that there is no formal audit action that BDO propose to take in relation to the council. So BDO's decision not to report any matters in the public interest is a final decision. The objector does have a right of appeal in relation to their decision not to apply for a declaration that there hasn't been any unlawful expenditure. That appeal period runs for a further 2 weeks and then would also conclude. So further to that, we've also received the audit completion certificates for both of those years, and that now closes BDO's involvement. The council, as through this committee for a very long time, has called the conclusion of that work, and it's an important milestone which we're pleased we've reached.
Thank you, Tom. So finally, a very satisfactory outcome in that BDO have completed their work. Frustrating that it's taken so long and we don't yet know what it's going to cost us, but we do know that both Michael and Stephen and Tom are going to keep a very close eye on any cost applications as they come in. Do either of you wish to say anything more on the BDO work at this stage before I invite Nick to comment? Stephen.
Just briefly, Chair, I was just going to say, whilst it's welcome, obviously we're very aware as a committee and indeed as a council that this is long overdue. I think Tom's point and yours about recognising the issues in terms of costs and following that up appropriately and robustly from the council will be taken forward by Michael, as you say, supported by myself. What I do want to place on record, Chair, is mindful of the individual officers that have had this particular series of issues hanging over them for some considerable time, is to place on record my thanks to them for their resilience, their professionalism, and quite frankly, their tenacity in the face of what has been an unacceptably long period of concern, challenge, and frankly, as we've heard, unjustifiable criticism. So I just wanted to place on record my thanks to all the officers concerned, and that includes Tom personally. I think our finance staff, as I've said before to this committee, are exceptionally professional and work exceptionally hard. And in regard to these long-standing matters, it's unfortunate it's taken this long for them to finally feel that their professionalism has been agreed with, Chair. So really that was all I wanted to say, but I think I welcome the outcome, but I'm disappointed that it's taken this long. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just very briefly, I think the ballpark figure for the BDO cost is around about 70,000, and I was just wondering whether we have any latitude to demand a discount on the basis of the extremely inefficient way in which they have behaved. And I'd also just observe that if that figure is correct, taken together with the similar objections in the EY era, the total bill is going to be around about 250,000, which is not a good outcome for the council taxpayer, I would suggest.
Let's just pick up Chris's point, and then I'll invite Michael to comment, if I may.
Thank you, indeed, Graham. It's very much welcome that finally we've put an end to these 2 years. It's been a very long ongoing saga, but it is worth reflecting in conjunction with the comments just made by the Chief Executive that the fault here did not lie with Cambridgeshire County Council. And if any evidence is needed for that, it is to see the number of other councils around the country which continue to have difficulties getting their BDO audits signed off one way or another. It's really unfortunate that we have been caught in BDO's problems and then we get some blame ourselves as a result, which is entirely and completely unjustified. I hope that no appeal will be made within that 2-week period we were told about, but I wonder, Chair, if it would be appropriate for us to be informed as a committee, once that 2-week period is over, whether or not any appeal has been made, and if one has been made, what the implications are. Thank you.
I think that's a good idea. So Tom, if you're happy to do that. Michael, do you want to comment on the cost point that Nick was making?
Yeah, just to say that there is a defined process for this, including the public sector auditors' appointments, PSAA, and it's probably inappropriate to comment beyond that at this stage. But clearly, we've heard councillors' views both at this meeting and at previous meetings around that, and we have made representations to PSAA in the past related to the objection works. But I agree there is a balance to be struck between the right to question and object to accounts and the cost incurred. And this is a good example we will be picking up with the PSAA and wider.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on then, Tom, to the audit of the financial statements for the year ending 31st of March 2022.
Well, Chair, with your permission, what I might do is skip to the most up-to-date year, and then we'll come back to the middle where we've got the most activity probably. But for the upcoming year ending 2024, we are continuing to plan and prepare for that close down and production of the accounts, which will be audited by KPMG as the incoming auditor, and Emma is here from KPMG. Liaison is continuing with the new auditor. We are publishing the timescales for close down activities across the council. Just picking out a couple of the impacts shown in 2.3.3 of the report. We are well underway with the property and valuations work, so have substantially received much of that information back in January, so some 4 months earlier than last year, which is a good start. We've begun to get underway some movement in resource in the finance team to kind of boost capacity and resilience, although also recognising that's a kind of multi-year approach. And the preparation's also progressing for implementation of IFRS 16, so principally collecting additional information about leases. Those are the main things in terms of preparation for next year, this coming year.
Okay, thank you. Chris, and then Emma, if I may, I'll invite you to comment about how the planning preparation is going from your point of view. But Chris first.
Thank you, Graham. I've got an unusual question on this, and it's to do with the discussions which have been taking place at national level now for a year or more about how to deal with what has been described as the audit crisis in the public sector generally and local government in particular. And we have a situation around the country where, on average, audits are getting further and further behind. And rather than look as a solution to that, to make the audit process and the accounts preparation process simpler, government's solution to this, and it's a one-off, a temporary solution in a way, seems to be that there will be some audits which won't take place at all, or which will take place on a reduced basis. Now, I have yet to hear what the conclusion of that is. It may not yet be a matter that has been made publicly aware at all by government. But are we sure that there will be audits which are expected, an audit which is expected for us in 23-24? Are we now convinced that if any audit is missed, it will be 24-25 rather than 23-24?
Would somebody like to, Tom, comment on that?
I'll come on to that in a moment as well, but let's take that now. In fact, I guess what the development we've had since the committee last met was that there was an update from the minister in January, kind of reconfirming government's intention to set a number of backstop dates. And although this hasn't been confirmed as far as I'm aware in legislation or changes in the code as yet, we understand the indication is that there will be a backstop in September for historic audits at that point. So our planning basis at this stage is that it's likely to be the 22-23 year, which is skipped, and EY have indicated to us that they would be looking to disclaim that opinion if nothing changes nationally. and there isn't any audit time kind of programmed in for that for either EY or ourselves. So that's our expectation at the moment, and that does have a knock-on impact to 23-24, which we're continuing to work through as well.
Just to be clear on that, my understanding is there's going to be consultation on what the proposals might be, and I've forgotten what you described them now, as a Society of Treasurers or something will be commenting from a national point of view from officers. Cambridgeshire County Council can also comment, and we'd have the opportunity at our next meeting to formulate our response to that consultation. I share your implied concerns that if there are a set of accounts which are not audited, that makes it very difficult for KPMG to get on and do their work, because they won't know what the starting position is and whether that's been properly examined or not. But do you want to come back, and then I'm going to ask Mark and Emma what their views are on this.
It's an entirely unsatisfactory position, Graham, that local authorities around the country have been placed in a situation where a decision which should have been made months ago for the time scale which is being talked about is only being made now, and even now there is some uncertainty about its application. And yes, I agree with you. The problem that we've got, I imagine, for KPMG, and which I'll be very interested to hear about, is how they will deal with opening balances for 23-24, given the lack of an audit or potential lack of an audit for 22-23. So I think that would be a very interesting thing for us to hear. Thank you, Graham.
So Mark and then Emma, would you care to comment on these theoretical thoughts that might or might not be coming from government, and what your company's views are on it?
Certainly happy to start. So I think the consultations are due out today. They were due out today or tomorrow, but they only have a 4-week window. So just to be aware for your timetable, if you need to comment as a council, you need to plan for that. There's 3 consultations going out, one from DLUC as the government department that is primarily on the backstop dates being planned for all audits up to 22-23, as Tom says, being the 30th of September, and then staged ones for subsequent years. So 23-24s would be the 31st of May 25 as currently set out in that consultation. The second consultation is by the National Audit Office on potential changes to the code requirements for auditors to follow, which is predominantly focused on value for money arrangements and some changes to that to streamline the process. There is due to be a third from SIPFA on temporary changes to the code of practitioners audit practice, so how you prepare a set of accounts, and that has 3 temporary measures in it. That is due out shortly. It's going through the SIPFA, LASAT, financial reporting audited bodies route to be approved before it comes out. I think it's imminent, though not quite there yet. All of those, going to your point, Councillor Bowden, is to reset the audit market. So 23-24 would be the first year of resetting it, with recovery stepped out in years after that, and the temporary measures in the code ease the preparation and therefore the audit of what's in the accounts over a longer period to, as you say, get everything back on track. So we have written to Michael and all other Section 151 officers in our cohort on the 6th of December, setting out our approach. We will be writing out, once the consultation comes out, we've had a chance to digest it, on any changes we think are necessary to that approach. But based on what we understand as of today, we don't think that is necessary. So we have been focusing on clearing all historic audits as far as possible, focusing on pension fund audits across the board. And we've reported to you here on Cambridgeshire's, and to do all value for money work through to 22-23 and report it by the end of April. Then it comes down to capacity to do anything else, and there is insufficient capacity to do 22-23 audits in the main, and therefore, back to Tom's point, we are looking at a disclaimed audit opinion for 22-23 in line with ministerial direction.
Okay. I think that's clear enough, even if we're not happy with it, but that's okay. Emma, so where does, oh, go on, Mark, did you want to add something?
The opening balance position is critical, but it's critical to all auditors, not just incoming ones on new audits. Equally, if we disclaimed one of our audits and then did the next year, it's the same for us. And it probably is the biggest elephant in the room in regard to how auditors take that on. I think you have to bear in mind as a committee that any disclaimed opinion in 22-23 has a 3-year unwinding process before you can get to a clear position, because you have an opening balance position, a closing balance position, and the movement in I&E for the 3rd year. So it is likely to be kind of a 4-year cycle before potentially there is a clean audit opinion as you are used to. So I think it's discussions with any auditor about the completeness of the audit under scrutiny, not focusing on maybe the words in the audit report and having due regard to what audit results reports under ISO 260 say in future years to get your assurance about robustness of closed down procedures, internal control arrangements and so on. So I think there's a little bit of an education process from all auditors to all members and both ways to understand the timeline, which is why it's called a recovery phase, and it just isn't a big bang for 23-24 and we've sorted it. Sorry, I thought that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Emma, so what's your thoughts on this, having heard about disclaiming and uncertainty about opening balances and the like?
So I think Mark's really clearly set out what is the current situation there. So in terms of the opening balance position, as Mark said, this is not a KPMG unique situation. It will be the requirement for any audit which has been disclaimed. We are expecting there to be a steer as to the procedures that we will be needed to do, so from the NAO, etc. And we will work with our technical teams in terms of the ability, you know, what we have to do and get in there early with Tom in terms of what we need to do for that requirement. I think what we have voiced would be a concern would be if we were expected to do a full open balance audit. So we're not expecting at the route. And as we said from there, that we are expecting to see a sort of several year back up to full assurance approach will be the case across the sector. So I think as Mark just touched on there, understanding that the focus will be on the in-year results and we need to not be too sort of bogged down by the wording in an opinion, which will be quite consistent across the sector and will take a few years to get us back to that clear pit. I think what is important is the acknowledgement about VFM. So VFM to be completed up to the 22-23 year, and then that will then continue. So we are expecting maybe some slight shifts to the code requirements for the VFM for the 22-23, but then the full assurance back up to the normal programme for the 23-24. So in terms of where the focus needs to be, those core concerns around how the council's run, looking at financial management, looking at governance, you know, that VFM work will continue as we have seen. So you'll get that sort of full picture for 22-23 for the couple of years which need to be done, and then that will then continue for 23-24. And our expectation is that the next audit committee will be bringing you our initial risk assessment for value for money. So we'll already be getting back up to train. And the same with the planning, we've already started all of that work. So whilst we will be slightly held in terms of understanding the bigger picture through what guidance is issued, at the moment we are still planning to work towards the normal audit cycle. And in some ways it's quite helpful to have a clear direction from EY in terms of the prior year situation, because that allows us to plan for that as expected.
Thank you very much. Michael, what's your thoughts?
I agree with Councillor Bowden in terms of we were probably at this stage back in around about September last year. So it's disappointing it's taken this long to get there, but I think that's a national position. I think just to pick up, I think that's a really good summary of what the consultation is going to include. What it's not going to include is the exact wording of the disclaimer, because that's going to be for each firm. So I think the support to local authorities, if that is to be the action that's carried forward after the consultation, will be important. because that communication to our residents, partners and businesses is going to be critical in terms of what this means, as well as any lending position and security related to that. Interestingly, the one thing that I've still not had a response on, and I've met with Deluxit for FRC during this process, is whether the accounting deadline will be moved for our submission, which is presently the 31st of May. The team are working towards the 31st of May. They will get the accounts done for that date. It's just disappointing that then, you know, they're working, having got to a recovered position, they're still working hard to achieve something that unfortunately will not get the recognition for 22-23, and will mean that we have staff answering questions going back multiple years still, but we have to find a way forward. I've said before, I'm an external auditor, so I appreciate the market position, and I think this is probably now the most pragmatic way forward. What I do suggest is that, because it will be a 4-week consultation, that if Cambridgeshire is responding, we will circulate that to the committee in advance and seek any further input. And we will be inputting to the Association of Local Authority Treasurers, as well as the Society of County Treasurers, and watch this space. There should be a survey and a publication coming out from the Association of Local Authorities that will circulate around in 2 weeks, giving the absolute definitive up-to-date position on where audits are.
Okay. Perhaps this is a slightly mischievous thing to say, but it's a consultation, but the government's already made up its mind, isn't it? That it is going to enable auditors to disclaim 22-23 because of lack of capacity within the industry. And there's no point in Chris and I getting excited and saying we think this is unacceptable, because the government's got nothing else it can do. Is that correct or not correct?
It will be interesting, having not read the consultation, to see if there are any other alternative options put forward as part of the consultation, and see how that is addressed. I'm not aware of any from the Public Select Committee process through to today, tomorrow, when this is announced. The alternative is no backstop date and a continuation of the current situation, which is will bounce along authority to authority. So I'm not aware of any realistic alternative.
Thank you, Chris.
I was going to say I find it amusing, but I don't think amusing is the right word to use. I find it noteworthy that we're all working on the assumption that a consultation, which is just starting now, that we know what the conclusion is going to be, which rather makes the point of having a consultation questionable. But I have to say that's often the case with consultations, whether they're from central government or from local government. I understand fully how the backstop position is meant to basically reset the situation as far as local government audit is concerned. But that doesn't of itself solve the problem, the underlying problem, which caused us to be where we are now, which is, or has been over a number of years now, a distinct lack of capacity within the private sector of auditors in the public sector side, particularly as far as we're concerned, local government. And I don't see at a national level that imbalance changing significantly from what I've seen, but those in the profession may be able to tell me otherwise. And whilst I have that overall general concern about the efficacy of this situation, that we won't find ourselves in 3 or 4 years' time almost in exactly the same position again, because there has been this lack of capacity. BDO, for example, I think totally getting out of the market, as far as I'm aware. My primary concern is, of course, for this council. And therefore, I would ask if KPMG can give some degree of assurance that any capacity issue, which we may have noticed in a previous auditor, will not occur as far as KPMG is concerned in this particular sector.
Emma, do you wish to come back at that?
Yes, so I think it's important to note that we obviously were not in the previous PSAA round of contracting. So when we decided and made the decision to come back into the market, we did a significant amount of work to make sure that we did have capacity, because we absolutely did not want to add to a situation or exacerbate a situation. So we have fully staffed all of the audits that we have been appointed to. That is all held in the planner. And everyone has a named manager. We've, as Tom will know, that we've already started the work here. So I can give you the assurances as far as I can at the moment that we have got the right level of resource in place. And we're also obviously engaged, as other firms will be, in terms of the broader piece about understanding and making sure that there is proportionality considered as part of local government sort of audits is going forward. And then there are discussions in that regard. We will keep an open dialogue in terms of when we're going to do the audits, but for now, if working to the current timeline, we are able to deliver. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're waiting to see the consultation document, which could be out any day now, and we'll circulate a draft response for people to comment on, because clearly if it's got to be within 4 weeks, we'll need to get our views in fairly quickly. I suggest as Cambridgeshire County Council Audit and Accounts Committee, we do put in a response, even if it complements things which other groups are saying. Okay, thank you very much. If there's nothing else on that, Tom, back, go on.
You're saying this is going on?
Yes.
Yep. So then coming next to the audit underway for the year ending 2022, continuing to make good progress. Audit items in relation to vehicle, plant and equipment balances and depreciation and a cash and VAT debtor have been closed since the committee last met, and we are have submitted for kind of final review an updated set of accounts reflecting the progress on adjusted and unadjusted audit differences. So subject to final procedures and also a dependency on the value for money work progressing, which Mark will talk about in a moment in relation to the addendum, we are in a good place, I think, on financial statements. There is a recommendation with the report for the committee to accept the treatment of audit differences that have been selected by officers in discussion with the auditor. A couple of things I would say in relation to the audit differences. There is, I think it's partly a feature of the amount of time the audit has been open, that there are a number, you see there are quite a number of differences, which does open up more potential for differences to arise. And throughout, we've taken quite a practical and pragmatic approach, kind of mindful of the capacity that's available to the council and working across a number of years. So the types of reasons that we would choose, we'll see predominantly we have chosen to adjust and we have minimised the unadjusted differences within an acceptable kind of audit materiality threshold. But we have chosen to not adjust some items where they would be, for instance, correctable in future years or have an impact on the council's financial planning basis, or there are other good reasons not to adjust. I'm conscious Ellie has to go fairly soon and will help me with any questions on the audit differences, so it may be useful to pause at that point.
Just before you pause and I bring Chris in, it says in the paper that Mark and EY are comfortable with the changes that are being proposed by management. So should we just record that? And I'll look to Mark to say, to nod or something similar.
We are comfortable with the proposed changes and the revised sets of accounts that we're checking through now.
Chris.
Thank you, Graham. This may be something for next year for KPMG rather than this, but looking at the list of adjustments or unadjusted and adjusted differences. On the unadjusted differences, it looks as though, it's presented as though we've failed to make adjustments of £17.5 million. And in gross terms, that's true. But what isn't identified is which items are debit changes and which are credit changes. And if you were to look at that, and you'd find that more than 2/3 of that 17.5 million relates to differences of opinion between the auditors' specialists about land and building values and our specialists about land and building values. But those differences aren't all in the same direction. 4.2 million are in one direction, 8.4 million are in another direction. So for anyone looking at picking up this report and looking at it, it would look as though we've failed to adjust for 17.5 million of difference, whereas in fact the net figure is very significantly lower than that. And I just wonder if in future it could be made clearer which direction differences are. If all differences are in one direction, it's very different from if the differences all net off against each other. On the adjusted differences, what isn't clear, and you have to go through it very, very carefully indeed to work anything out, is what element relates to changes to the actual values in the accounts and what are merely changes to notes. And I think in future it would be really helpful to highlight things which reflect changes to the actual accounts, to the actual numbers in the main accounts, rather than just adjustments to the notes.
Good points there. I'm bringing Ellie in or Tom in a minute just to comment on that. But Mohammed, do you want to just raise some points on this?
So similar point to Chris, actually, it was just on the unadjusted differences. The three main ones relate to valuations, essentially. And basically, the view was we don't agree with either the local knowledge of the person performing the valuation, or they don't understand the basis or the commercial reality of how it's run. And I guess it was a learning going forward in terms of how do we make sure KPMG are using someone suitable but independent, so we don't end up in a situation where we're just disagreeing, but we actually taking that on board and getting value from that specialist valuation, essentially.
That's a good point. So Tom or Ellie, do you want to respond to those comments?
Yes, I think we'd acknowledge all of those points. We can certainly take the point around debit and credit forward. I think we've tried to indicate where, at least in the adjusted differences, where there's an impact on the statement, the core statements and notes, but we will look to make that clearer in future. This does sort of play into a wider point about the focus in audit, local government audit, and perhaps more broadly on asset valuations, which are highly material. I think that's something that Treasury is still reviewing in relation to the whole of the public sector, and there is this potential for differences of opinions between experts and things moving around the balance sheet in a way that doesn't impact cash or the resources that the council has available, or any of our kind of decision making about council tax levels, for instance. So you do wonder about the usefulness of it, but we'll take on board the comments about presentations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Emma, that is something that you'll be able to pick up on the next annual audit that you're doing.
From a valuation perspective, yes, very much. I think Debbie this morning probably already started talking about evaluations. So we have got a specialist valuation team. So we'll make sure they're engaged with some early conversations so we can have those chats with the valuer to understand methodology and see obviously if there is likely to be any areas where we might have a disagreement. We've got enough time to work through that.
Thank you very much. Mohammed, your hand is still up. Is that legacy? No. Okay, thank you. Anything else on your item? Otherwise, we'll go to Mark and Jacob. No. So Mark and Jacob, you've kindly done a summary of your value for money work. Do you want to just take us through the key points?
Certainly, but if I could just talk about the accounts quickly, just to give you full disclosure and comfort. So we did bring our audit results report to the 1st of December meeting. We have updated it, but given the length of it, it wasn't deemed appropriate to put in full on this, but happy to update on the outstanding items, which is in summary what Tom said. We are working through the revised set of accounts as we speak, and then into closing procedures. So we are exactly where we are, but I think it's important for you to know that there is a updated audit results report that will be provided for authorization processes, which you can share with the committee. But then in terms of value for money, so value for money covers 4 years, picking up where BDO left off and working through all of those procedures. And I think the focus should be on page 5 of our summary report, because that sets out what the conclusions will be and they inextricably link through to the weakness and the qualified opinion that BDO did issue in 2017-18. So in 18-19, 19-20, and at the moment 2021, there will be value for money issues to report in respect of procurement, which is the legacy issue from BDO. 2021 is the year where we are seeking any assurances that the recommendations issued by BDO were put in place in full and the arrangements worked in full for the year. And it is that piece that we are waiting for, which is why that is outstanding. But our default position will be they are not unless proved otherwise. So 2021 may be have another matter to report. 2018-19 does have one additional basis of qualification in relation to county farms and the two reports that were brought through this committee in detail at the appropriate time. So we will reference that. Otherwise, we are currently working through our 22-23 arrangements, and we'll be bringing our risk assessment to and conclusions on that to your to the April onwards meeting when we have reported that. So I think we've caught up and we're in a position to conclude, and we'll be progressing to that reporting within the next 2 months. Happy to take any questions.
Any comments, questions? On procurement, Mairead has picked up an issue about guided busway procedures, which concern me slightly in one of her internal audit reports. I was hoping that all the issues about procurement and contract management, which BDO had picked up on that you comment on, had now been resolved. But it seems as though in this particular instance, which was quite a big contract for the council, it clearly hasn't been. Is that anything that is worrying you, or are you fairly content that it is being dealt with properly now?
So I think there's a difference between having inadequate underlying procurement arrangements across the board versus a one contract issue. Clearly, a significant contract of that type would need review, and I think we have been speaking with Mairead about what they have done, and we'll continue to do so to inform our conclusions.
All right, thank you. Any comments, questions from anybody else? No. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing on VFM. That's very satisfying. So we move on to the next item, which was the so we're asked to agree, to note the report, which we've done, and accept the treatment of audit differences selected by management that are shown in the appendix, which we have also done, but we've made some suggestions that in future years the credits and the balances and the impacts on the actual money available for the council is clear rather than just what appears in the notes. Okay, item 5 then is the internal audit progress report. And can I ask Mairead Clayton, head of internal audit and risk management, to introduce this report? Mairead.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ali, for coming.
So this is our regular internal audit progress update, summarising audit activity to date in 2023 to 24. So some key things to highlight within the report. We've had 10 final reports issued since the last time we came to this committee, which are summarised in section 3, along with the list of reports which are currently at draft stage. The current version of the internal audit plan is presented as at section 6 of this report as usual, with a couple of minor changes from our previous report. However, just to note to the committee that we are now in the process of undertaking kind of our major refresh of the audit plan for 2024-25 over the next few weeks. So this is likely to change significantly by the time it comes back to this committee at the end of March in a separate report around the audit plan for 2024-25. We have some good news within the audit team. So we have a new deputy head of internal audit, Shaifali Wadwa, who is now in post. And we've also appointed a new senior auditor, which is very good news. And we are starting now to receive draft reports as well from our co-source partner, TIAA Limited. So some positive news around resourcing within the team. At section 7 within the report, we have our regular update on implementation of audit actions. Currently 82 actions that are overdue for implementation, down from 96 at our previous meeting. So still quite a high volume of overdue actions, but there is a positive direction of travel there. Then section 9 covers whistleblowing and investigation cases, both open cases and summaries of those cases which have closed. And key financial systems update is provided at section 10. We've got the pensions and payroll audits both underway. We did have some delays getting access to the pension system, which we have resolved. We're still hoping that that should be completed in time for the annual opinion. And then also not within the report, but worth noting, is that this committee's referral to the Adults and Health Committee went through in January, and the committee considered the 2 outstanding audit actions from the Public Health Directorate that this committee brought to the Adults and Health Committee's attention. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
So just on that last point, you and I were concerned about this amendment from Richard, which unfortunately, because Richard was taken ill and had to go into hospital the night before, wasn't tabled, and therefore it wasn't picked up. And our understanding is that the Public Health Department have agreed that, like the rest of the County Council, they will be following open book accounting. Chris.
I would suggest, Graham, that it wasn't unfortunate. It was quite fortunate that it wasn't taken. And that way it didn't become a distraction for us. The commitment has been given. Let's be quite honest, it's not the first target date we've had, but the commitment has been given, and it was stated at the meeting of the Adults and Health Committee that the necessary procedures will be in place by the 30th of April 2024. And I think it is now, given how many times this has failed, it is quite essential that if that target date is not met, that the committee ought to be advised by email as quickly as possible, because there is a limit to how many times you can have target after target after target. But on the basis of what we heard at the Adults and Health Committee, and it's a shame, Graham, I know you sometimes attend that. It's a shame you weren't there, but I know that Councillor Seif was certainly there. And it was, the points were made, the points were received, and I think that there has now been acceptance that this must be implemented within the timescale which is in front of us. So it was an extremely helpful exercise.
So you were at that meeting, were you? And Jeff was at that as well. I apologise. Well, I don't apologise. I wasn't there because I was in India, and so I had to send a sub. But otherwise, I would have explained to Alex as well why the recommendation had been put forward by internal audit and the background as you just described it. Okay, and Jeff.
Thank you very much, Chair. Entirely different question, actually. It's really on your nomenclature and understanding the ratings that you've given, because of course we can go into some of the detail of some of the conclusions of the report, but I just wonder what it means by limited systems assurance, which is worrying, because if you don't get your systems right, everything fails, it seems to me, generally. But I wonder what it means in the context. Sorry if the detail is in the report, but I haven't picked it up. And what it means in the context of your first report, place and sustainability. I mean, is it money control, or is it just communication? I think, what does it involve, and what the implications of that?
Thank you, Councillor Seif. So we do cover the sort of general definitions, which are in the report at 2.2.5. So in respect of the systems assurance, a limited assurance would mean there are significant control weaknesses that present a high risk to the control environment. Clearly, that's quite general terminology and not specific to any individual audit. So in respect of the climate change and environment strategy audit, the limited assurance nature of the opinion that was given, it really relates to the fact that the strategy itself is very ambitious. There is significant work still underway within the authority to obtain things like the baseline data that we need in order to assess as a council whether by implementing the actions that are set out in the strategy as it stands, we can be confident of achieving the objectives of the strategy itself. So while, the good opinion on compliance outlines the fact that officers are working hard to obtain that data and they have got that path to obtaining baseline information and understanding the impact of our actions. Actually, the nature of the strategy and the nature of kind of climate change as a risk means that we're not in that position where we can say definitively that by doing the actions we've identified, we will certainly sort of meet the objectives that we've set ourselves.
Is that true of the children's absolutely? As I wonder, Huntingdon Nursery School, what does the systems breakdown there or inadequacy there mean? Sorry, again, you may well have explained it in the report, so I do apologise, but it's a.
So the limited systems assurance would be.
So you haven't actually, you put not applicable for the audit actions agreed. So I just wonder how that plans out.
Yes, so in respect of schools audits, individual recommendations within schools audits are not risk rated and they're not followed up individually by internal audit. There is an action plan which is agreed within the school and presented to governors. And then we incorporate thematic findings from the range of schools audits that we do into a report to the Director of Education, and we follow up on the more corporate actions that are taken by us as a council to address to any instances of control weaknesses that we find in schools. So in respect of the primary schools that we've reviewed, that was a focus on kind of financial governance within schools. So things like looking at payroll procedures, procurement procedures, looking at the school's financial value standards and those sorts of areas.
Big routines really, aren't they? You would expect them to be in place. Well, you would have done. That's why you reported on them.
I think Nick and then Chris.
Yeah, I think this issue about the climate and change and environment strategy and the baseline data is something that's not specific to this council, but is something all organisations that are dealing with this issue have to grasp. And certainly when I was dealing with this on the environment strategy group in the university, we had to try very hard to develop science-based targets, which simply don't exist. And it's very difficult to know what progress you're going to make if you don't know where you started from. I have had a brief word with the chair, I being vice chair of Environment and Green Investment Committee, and we've agreed to have a discussion to see what, if anything, can be done with Frank and with Cheryl French, perhaps on Thursday when we have CBC.
Chris.
Thank you, Graham. It is good to hear that the number of outstanding items has reduced, but it seems to me that the number of high items of high importance, which are more than 3 months old, appears to have increased. There are 13 of them in total, which I'm sure feels larger than the number we've seen before. And I would encourage all those involved in the governance of this council to be aware of that and to look to ensure that in future we have fewer than 13 high items shown as being outstanding for more than 3 months. I note that 4 of those items are on the subject of VAT, which is a subject I had a great deal of experience of in my working lifetime, although my knowledge of it may be 15 years out of date. But I do worry when I see comments such as when talking about the VAT team developing documented procedures to give clear guidance as to VAT treatment, that whilst procedure notes have been drafted, that review and approval of the procedures has been delayed as the managers are focusing on the close down of the 22-23 accounts. And that seems to me to be indicative of something which I've seen all the way through my working life, that people aren't interested in VAT and don't give it the importance and priority that it does deserve, because mistakes on VAT can be really costly as far as the council is concerned, especially if they are cumulative errors which grow up over many years, and then suddenly you find yourselves either with a very large bill or an amount which is irrecoverable, which should have been recoverable. On that subject of VAT, I note, and I have raised this before with Michael, that the service now has confirmed that partial exemption limit calculations are now included as part of the monthly VAT return process. When I last raised this, I was told by Michael that he wasn't able to give any information because he hadn't got it. And again, I'm going back rather a few years in terms of my knowledge, but in my time, there was a 5% limit. Michael, I see you're nodding your head, so it's still the same. How close are we to that 5% limit, please? If the information is now being provided to you on a regular basis.
I'm going to defer to Tom in terms of the latest position, because my update would be much nearer towards the end of the financial year.
I can't give you an exact figure either, Councillor Bowden, but we certainly in recent memory we've had no concern that we're coming up close to the limit. It's not been it's not been of concern, but we can provide you some further information outside of the meeting.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Chairman. One other request, if I may. We've seen on a number of these, we could talk about the public health ones in particular, but it's not the only one, where it gets onto our high importance list of over 3 months old with a target date, and then that target date isn't met, and we see the same item come up the next report as well. May I make a request that target dates are retained on the report, so that if a target date has been set and missed, we see that original target date together with the new target date. And that way we can more easily see items which are just failing time and time again to meet target dates, because our target dates disappear. Once one target date fails, it just disappears and a new target date is put in. If we had a list of the target dates which there had been for resolution of the item, it would show just how serious the situation was in terms of not resolving it.
All right, is that something that can be done easily?
Thank you. So within the Annex B document summarising the outstanding recommendations, the target date column does show the original target date for the action. So it will show the slippage between the original date that was set for completion of the action and then the current revised target date. So we don't currently retain any target dates which may be set in between those two figures, but it should still be clear kind of the extent of any slippage that's occurred within the action.
I am aware, Chair, that there are occasions where something really is very difficult to achieve, and it's known that the target date is going to be a long way into the future. We've had experience of that, I think, on the computer side recently. That's different from being given a target date and saying, we'll sort it out next quarter. It doesn't get sorted out. Then they say again, we'll sort it out next quarter, and it doesn't get sorted out. And that's where the value could come in of having a list of the target dates which have been missed, as well as the revised target date, so that we can see the extent to which there has been a failure to achieve what had been expected to be achieved.
Okay.
Yeah, very happy to add that in. We probably won't be able to do that retrospectively, so it will just be kind of going forward from the next report.
All right, thank you. Alan and then Mohammed. Oh, sorry, Stephen wants to come in and then Alan and Mohammed.
Thank you, Graham. Just one point.
Hang on a minute, Alan.
Sorry.
I think Stephen's comment was related to this. Was it?
Thank you, Councillor Sharp, for giving me the opportunity to speak now. Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, it was actually to endorse the comments from Councillor Bowden. I think that's a very helpful way of looking at audit actions. It's something I've seen elsewhere. It will also somewhat help improve ownership from parts of the council that seem to focus on revised target dates more often than not. So I'm very happy to have that level of openness here in front of committee and indeed the public. I think it's probably also helpful to just reference the fact that Mairead reports to the corporate leadership team once a month on progress with the audit plan and progress with audit recommendations. And whilst it's good to see the reduction in the essential actions that were reported previously to committee, as you might anticipate, the next focus I've asked executive directors to bear down is on those that are rated high. And whilst they may take more time to resolve than some of the lower priority actions, Those are clearly the ones that create a greater degree of risk. So therefore, the attention needs to be focused on those, in my view. The final comment, Chair, that I wanted to make, and I'm reflecting on some of the observations from members helpfully made at Adults and Health Committee and again subsequently here around the public health actions. It's just to recognise the fact that, of course, audit actions are merely recommendations from our internal auditors, which management have then accepted. It is then incumbent on management to ensure that the date by which they have agreed to deliver the audit action is achievable, is reasonable, and is one they are confident they can achieve. So I think the transparency that Councillor Bowden has recommended is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan and then Mohammed.
Yeah. Sorry, so Councillor Steve touched on the schools audit and really 5.2.2 on page 39. I'm pleased you're looking at the review because it's in terms of budget deficits for schools, and I'm a governor of a small school, and I sit on CYP as well, and it's something we've discussed in children and young people's about obviously the challenging budgets that some of the schools are facing. So I welcome that review, and hopefully that presumably a report will go to the Director of Education. It would be useful, certainly, I think, for not speaking out of turn, but it would be useful for that to come to CYP as well, for them to see what issues, because it is certainly a challenging budget issue that schools have got at the moment. So I welcome any, not wishing to, because obviously the finance team in supporting children, supporting schools are obviously spending a fair bit of time, I'm sure, actually helping some of these schools with their budgets. But the more looking at it from a slightly removed position in some ways is possibly more helpful than if you're involved in it all the time. So any insight you can give would be I'm sure, gratefully received. Thanks.
Okay, do you want to comment on that, or?
Yep, just to say very happy to share that report.
Right. Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you. So kind of pulling us back to overdue actions, essentially. One of the things I thought we could have a look at is for essential and high-rated actions which are overdue more than 3 months is an opportunity really for this committee to get closer to some of those. So potentially inviting some of the execs to talk us through the new plan and how that is going to be achievable. One, that's an opportunity for us to challenge and check as a sensible date set, as well as an audit committee getting closer to some of the issues that the council is facing.
Okay, Mairead, any comments on that suggestion?
If the committee would like kind of additional information on any of those actions, then yes, certainly be happy to assist in facilitating that.
Chris?
We have a grave danger, Graham, that we could end up being swamped by information if we were to go for all of the high items which are more than 3 months old. I think it's a very good idea that's being put forward by Mohammed, but we'd need to be quite selective about how many or which items we asked to come before us for a deeper dive. I think it's a really good idea, however, and if every meeting of the audit committee had 1 or 2 such items, I think that would have 2 effects. The first would be to inform the committee much better about what is or is not happening, and the second would be to ensure that managers get their act together so they don't have to appear before us and they get the necessary items completed on time. So I think it's a really good idea which should be considered for future meetings of the audit committee.
Stephen?
Chair, thank you. What I'd like to propose is, can you remit that to me to reflect on further with the Chief Internal Auditor, and we'll come back with a proposed approach. I have to say I have used something similar in the past in various audit committees, both as a member of the committee scrutinising the work of executives and then as an executive being scrutinised by audit committees. What I might want to do, Chair, is link that to the annual governance statements and perhaps think about how we can give you a role in wider assurance from directors throughout the year. So perhaps if you could remit that to me as an action, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know whether it just applies to me because I had a particular interest in it, but I thought every member of this committee could access the internal audit report through the portal. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I thought you have given me that access
We will have access through a Teams link.
Yeah.
But it's not yet set up because we haven't worked out the IT arrangements to do it. But Michael is taking that away and is going to sort it.
I can provide an update on that, Chair, and just say that Michael has already sorted it. So the access is set up as of today, and I will be uploading those reports shortly. And then I'll send an email to members of the committee explaining how to access them and who to contact if we have any issues.
Instant. Excellent. Thank you very much. The only comment I wanted to make was to highlight section 9.6.1 on page 52 about a national fraud initiative investigation, which identified an individual working for the county council and another local authority. The employee was suspended and an investigation report produced. However, the employee resigned prior to a hearing taking place. So there is nothing more that we can do, unfortunately. Chris.
Thank you for raising that, Graham. One of the things which did occur to me when I saw that originally, and I'm sure there will be a positive answer to this, was the other local authority also informed about this?
Mairead or Emma, who I know is online, do you wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to confirm the other authority is aware, yes.
And the other question which I wrote, even.
Chair, a couple of observations around this particular point in the report. First of all, it just proves the value of the National Fraud Initiative. It's not the first time I've seen something like this in a local authority or indeed other employer, but it does once again prove the importance of undertaking this work and participating in the NFI as we do. In the case concerned, I thought it was probably helpful to advise committee and provide a bit more reassurance to say that having concluded the investigation, irrespective of the resignation of the individual, we understand and have evidence to prove that the second role that was referenced was undertaken out of hours of the Cambridgeshire County Council role, and it would have actually been possible for both roles to have been undertaken and deliver all contracted hours. We also understand that both from the line manager within our organisation and indeed the other local authority, that the individual was not only deemed to be effective, but highly effective by both the managers. There was no underperformance and no under-delivery in terms of their requirements. That said, working two full-time jobs clearly is a bit of a health and safety and working time directive issue. Nonetheless, at the conclusion of the investigation, although there was a resignation which was accepted, whilst we did have some evidence of dishonesty by the individual, there was no evidence of clear fraud or serious misuse of working time on behalf of either authority. Clearly, we can't prejudge what the outcome of a hearing would have been had this have been taken to a disciplinary hearing. However, Chair, there is a point that you raised that I think I'd like to come back to, and that is when somebody leaves our employ, whether or not we choose to proceed with disciplinary matters. And actually, from experience elsewhere, some authorities do opt to conclude disciplinary matters because, of course, while the employee may no longer be with us, it's sometimes relevant, appropriate, and dare I say, in the public interest to conclude those matters fully. And that's whether the individual chooses to participate or not. So I think actually, rather than just assuming that that continues to be our case, I'm going to follow that up with HR, and I will also be asking Mairead to include a review of the disciplinary policy application in next year's internal audit plan. So I will be revisiting the policy issue with our HR team, but would also suggest that, subject to Mairead's conversations and ultimately submission of the draft audit plan to this committee, we include something on the disciplinary policy application for next year. Thank you.
Excellent news. I hope we would all support that sort of activity. Okay, thank you. Emma, I don't know whether you're online and wish to add any comments at this stage, as this is something which clearly comes under your remit.
Thank you very much, Chair. Not at the moment. I think Mairead covered the points. But again, I think that with the internal audit function, it's good to have that those new appointments within there will give us some more resilience, which is very much welcomed, I think, especially from Mairead.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? No, I think we are, unless there's anything, Mairead, do you want to come back on? I think we've gone through your report quite thoroughly. So we're asked to consider the contents of this report and review and comment on the proposed revised internal audit plan for 2023-24 outlined at section 6 of the report, which we have done. Okay, final item is the committee agenda plan. Rashinda, are there any updates that you wish to add?
No changes to the published papers, Chair.
So there was just one thing which had occurred to me this morning when I was just scanning through this. We talked at our last meeting about the committee's review of effectiveness, and at some stage towards the end of March, all the items in the action plan are due for completion, and therefore it will be sensible to try and come back to this committee with how you got on with them. Is that feasible to do for the end of March meeting, which seems at the moment to have a particularly light agenda, rather than the May meeting, which has got a lot more on it?
Yes, Chair, I think, yeah, should be fine.
As long as you don't say we're making progress on everything, but things like, what does the chief executive think of the committee? We should be able to get an answer to that pretty quickly, I think. He says, hopefully. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. And the other items are pretty much as standard, unless anybody's got any comments, questions. All right, thank you. So we've noted the agenda plan with the addition of that one item, and that concludes today's meeting. The next one is on, as I say, Thursday, the 28th of March at 2 p.m. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. Thank you, Mohammed, and I hope everything goes well for you and your wife over the next few days, or however long it is.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.